Hello and welcome back, everyone. At Sanctuaries of Learning, we believe that great teaching doesn't just deliver content, it builds bridges. In secondary schools, scaffolding is one of the most powerful ways to build those bridges between students and success, between challenge and support. This year, Katoomba High School was named one of the top 25 highest growth schools in the HSC over recent years, which is a testament to the deep thinking and dedication of their staff to student growth. In this issue, we're exploring how scaffolding can be used not just to support, but to differentiate meaningfully in secondary classrooms. How do we provide structure without limiting independence? How do we ensure that all students can access rigorous learning and thrive in it? So to unpack this, I'm joined by four brilliant educators who each bring a depth of insight, leadership, and heart to their work. Firstly, we are welcoming back Dr. Barbara Blackburn, who obviously loves us. She's come back. We all know she's a renowned author, speaker, consultant with a background in secondary education and a passion for student success. She's written over 30 books on teaching and leadership, and her most recent book, Scaffolding for Success, Helping Learners Meet Rigorous Expectations Across the Curriculum, is a super practical guide for teachers looking to raise the bar without leaving students behind. Hi, Barb.
Hi, thank you for having me back.
We have Tess Devine, the principal of Katoomba High School, who has worked in public education for over 22 years across Western Sydney and the Central West. With a teaching background in maths and VET business services, Tess has held a range of leadership roles, including head teacher, teaching and learning, and deputy principal. She holds a master's degree in educational leadership and commerce. Brad McLeod is the Deputy Principal of Stage 6, Skills and Pathways at Katoomba High School. A proud product of public education, Brad has worked in diverse settings, including rural and remote schools, and was recognised in 2009 as the youngest lead teacher in Victoria. His leadership experience spans teaching and learning, curriculum, well-being, creative arts, and school administration. Hi, Brad. Andrew Finlay is currently the relieving deputy principal and substantive head teacher HISI at Katoomba High School. He chairs the school's writing team and is also a textbook author with Cambridge University Press. Before becoming a teacher, Andrew worked as a historian and public programming manager in museums and art organisations across New South Wales and Singapore. And he's currently completing a law degree, which is very
Bit of
cool
time.
in his spare time. All right. So thanks for joining me today. So happy that you'll be helping so many schools who receive this newsletter. Barbara, I'd like to ask you first. Some people think scaffolding is just about giving students extra help or simplifying tasks. How do you define scaffolding? And what misconceptions should we be aware of, especially when differentiating for students who struggle?
That's such a big question. I love it, but it's such a big question. And um, scaffolding is a really complex way of supporting students so they can learn at their best. And that can be teaching them strategies that they can use when they get stuck on their own. It might mean that we come alongside them and help them when they get stuck. It might mean that I provide resources so that if they need additional help, then they take advantage of it. But it's really going back to that notion of looking at how to support students so that they can learn at their best. Not do it for them, not make it too easy, but how do we support them so they can thrive?
I'm hearing it's about planning the support we want for our students to succeed, but not making them so dependent on that support, gradually releasing it so that they gain independence.
Yes,
Hopefully I'm on the right track.
you are.
And Katoomba High School, any of you, what beliefs have you worked to shift at Katoomba around what struggling students are capable of, particularly in reading and writing?
I was going to, we talked a little bit about this before. I was going to let Brad answer this because he's been here much longer than me. I've only been here 18 months. And so I've got a particular perspective, but I might ask Brad to talk about that a little bit longer term, Brad?
Okay, a little bit of history. I haven't been here that long. I'm not 100 years old, but about 5 years ago, our numbers were increasing. We reached our population of about 988, I think it was, in 2021. And with that came a greater staff entitlement. So we were able to create a new head teacher position. And the executive team, we were away on a conference and we were doing a bit of soul searching. And we all had this sort of penny drop moment where we realized that sort of that academic rigor, that, getting serious about performance, particularly in the stage 6 and the HSC, is something that we really needed to focus on. We've always been regarded as doing pretty good things in the wellbeing space, and we were doing innovative things in that. But our HSC results in particular, they kind of just, they were okay, but they were sort of plateauing, and we saw that was the opportunity. That's where we needed to go next, and everyone was on board with that. There was a sense of excitement because we knew we were ready for that.
Right.
Did I answer the question?
Well, the question was around, like, were there particular beliefs that you had to shift at Katoomba around, what struggling students were capable of?
Well, yeah. I also told Tess this story recently that in the community perception, there was a particular school that was said, like, if you want your kids to do really well, academically, you send them there. If you want them to perform well in this particular area, you go there. If you want your kid to get a hug, send them to Katoomba High. And we knew, okay, hugging's a great thing, it's lovely, but that's not what our core business is as a school. And that we knew, that our staff knew, and our kids knew deep in their heart that they can do just as well as any other school in the mountains, and we needed to feed and nurture that.
Right.
One of the things, Steph, that I've noticed in the 4 years I've been here is that there's a much stronger growth mindset now, and also the embedding of high expectations throughout the school in learning. So I think Brad touched on it before, that we were definitely a strong wellbeing school, and wellbeing obviously underpins learning, but we needed to really promote and signal that this is a place of teaching and learning, and that we have high expectations with high support. And those two things are sort of something we've been talking about a lot lately. High expectations with high support, and promoting that growth mindset, that this is where you're at now, but through scaffolding, through differentiation, through systems and processes and consistency around teaching, we're able to build that growth mindset, student confidence in their ability, particularly around things like writing, something that we've been focusing a lot on, which I think has, in partnership with some other areas and some work that other teachers have been doing in the school, really contributed to the success last year. But giving students the confidence through scaffolding, through modeling, to be able to achieve and to write, demystifying the idea of writing.
And Steph, to piggyback on what Drew is saying, I think a real myth that is out there is that rigorous learning doesn't include scaffolding. And what I passionately believe about rigor is that it is those high expectations, but it is the support and scaffolding to help students achieve it. If all we do is just make things harder, that's not helping students learn. That's not teaching them to be independent learners. And so what Drew is saying is really on target with the international conversation about rigor, that you do have those high expectations and that support is a critical part of it.
And I asked the Katoomba High team as well, how did you help shift your teachers' beliefs maybe around having higher expectations of your students? Or did you feel like they already had those?
I was going to say, what one really important thing I think to note is that this has taken some time. Like, it's not, I think sometimes people think, oh, we'll just change some processes and we'll do some PL and suddenly everything will be fine. As Brad said, it's probably 5 years ago, and the results that we're seeing, the results now through the cohorts. And I think Brad will talk a little bit later about that particular cohort last year's HSC and the work that was done with them. Like, that's taken them 4 years or more to get to that point. And I think the other thing, we've been talking a bit lately about consistency of message and the importance of saying the same thing regularly and building some umbrellas under which we do everything, you know, because the department comes out with a million things every year that they want us to do, and we hear these great things. We want to just have a few key areas that we're focusing on, and whatever we're doing, we make sure it's aligning to one of those 3 key areas. And if it's not, we don't do it. And we kind of sell it to staff or explain it to staff that it's not something extra, it's part of this. So I think that's been part of the journey.
I can hear like you have that clear line of sight test, and as a principal, keeping the focus narrow and deep and aligned to those 3 areas is essential, and we need you as the principal to do that. And I know Drew and Brad, I'm going to ask you a bit later to talk about the initiatives you're leading and how you've been able to create that consistency, that message in alignment with what you're focusing on as a school. But before that, Barb, I'd like to ask you, what are some practical ways teachers can scaffold instruction to support struggling readers and writers while still keeping expectations high?
Well, one of my favorites is just it's an old standard that everybody uses, but I'm particular about how I use it, and that's graphic organizers. And I don't care if I'm talking to secondary teachers or kindergarten teachers, graphic organizers help, because what they do for students is they help them organize information and they help them plug it into the right place so that they can use it. So if I'm doing a high school writing piece and I want students to be able to have a thesis and then have 3 pieces of evidence to back it up, and for each piece of evidence, I want specific sources, both within the text and from outside the text. If I put that in a grid, then there are some of my students that will do well that might not have otherwise. There are some who don't need it, and that's okay. You don't have to use it with everybody, but there are some who just need to visually see exactly what they are doing. And, you know, I can scaffold it that way. And what I can also do is say to one of my students, you know, if Drew comes to me and is just totally overwhelmed and just can't do it, I'm going to cover up 2 of the pieces of evidence and just leave one and say, Drew, all I want you to do is 1 piece of evidence and then the support that goes with that. And that's all I want you to do. When you do that, I want you to come back. And then when he comes back, I uncover up point 2 and we just do number 2. And so it's not that I'm going to lower my expectations. In fact, I'm going to have the high expectations, but I'm going to really differentiate how I provide that support so that they can do it. And it doesn't have to be hard. Graphic organizers just happen to be one of the easiest things that there is. Another one I really love is a tool called a Guiderama. I absolutely love it. The only thing is it takes a little bit of time. So I tell people that's not the first one to go to. But what it is that whether you've got students who are reading text that is too challenging, or they're having to watch a video and they don't know what to pay attention to, you give them a mix of a study guide and a think aloud. So it's things like if you're doing a video at 0 seconds, one of the things I do before I start is write down what I know. That way I can connect it to what I see later. 55 seconds. This really seems confusing. Did you know the ratio sometimes looks like a fraction? What is that about? What do you need to pay attention to see how that works? I love guidoramas. They're great for text. Also, it's just that you generally have to create them. There's not a database. You can't Google and find a bunch of them out there on the web. So you do have to create them. So I recommend that teachers work together on that. But that's another good one. So graphic organizers tend to not take long. Guidoramas are also very effective, but take a little bit longer to prepare.
They are super practical ideas, and hopefully we can share one, maybe Barb, with on the newsletter, just one.
You can tell me whatever you want, Stephanie, and you know I will give it to you.
Thank you. But I do value that through these scaffolds, you're getting the students to think. You're getting them to be active with their learning. It's not like the teacher just said, here's the graphic organizer, off you go. Sometimes we release too quickly to the you do phase. And the students don't know how to use these things to support their learning. So I like that the teacher still has to think about, what will help these students to be successful. So I always
Yeah,
love
and I would say, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I would say that no matter what type of scaffolding you're using, you need to teach students how to use it, because the goal is for you to not be there doing it for them all the time. The goal is for you to give them something. Sometimes you're closer, sometimes you're further away, but they need to know, so that I watched a school do this very effectively. And what they did, they taught a math graphic organizer, and they taught it to the students and they used it in class, and it was designed to help you break down word problems. And one of the things that happened was, when the students got to the standardized test at the end of the year, it was all word problems, but you could see them drawing off the different parts of the graphic organizer, so that they were using it. They had learned it, they knew how to use it, and when they needed it, they used it. I'll also give you that one, okay, because it's a really cool one.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You're so generous. So I love that we're getting into the practical nature of things. I would love to now hear from Brad and Drew about your great initiatives around the explicit teaching of writing, your writing teams, Drew, and then maybe Brad about your study skills program that have been really successful. Like, what did you prioritize first and why? Like, what would be helpful for the schools listening to this right now?
Brad, do you want to go
Yeah.
first? Because the first thing introduced was study skills, and so
Perfect.
Brad's
Yeah.
program came first.
Go,
Yeah.
Brad.
Yeah, that's right. That was certainly the origin. So when we sort of had our light bulb moment around needing to build in some of that academic rigor and success and the platforms, you're talking about student support on learning some of those basic skills. We realized, like we explicitly teach writing, like we explicitly teach numeracy, we realized our kids lacked fundamental skills on how to learn effectively. So we initiated a study skills program, initially targeting year 10, that we would explicitly teach them things like retrieval practices, goal setting, how to battle procrastination. We did a lot of work on time management, organization.
I need a bit of help with
things,
this myself.
these things you take for granted. You think kids understand these, but they don't. They really need to be walked through and guided with this stuff. And in that course, which all year 10s are exposed to, we do a lot around achievement motivation. We do tap in a little bit around personal environment, their own well-being, the psychology of learning and motivation. But the very practical supports, we do things like effective note-taking, how to summarize effectively, research effectively, revision, learning logs, and we do a lot around spaced practice versus chunking. Some very practical supports that we provide kids is how to use flashcards with their retrieval practices, brain dumps, mind maps, graphic organizers like Barbara was talking about. All those skills that kids now, we go up into our senior study hub now, which is flourishing, by the way, and it's so amazing to see kids up there using their flashcards effectively, kids in little study groups self-quizzing and peer coaching. It really warms the heart to see that the work that we've been doing now for about 4 years is now embedded in the culture. And there definitely has been that cultural shift where we are no longer just the school where you go to get a hug and have nice well-being. We know, and we proved it last year, that our kids can be just as good as any of the schools out there. And that's really helped our own staff collective efficacy, our own staff, motivation as well. And the kids feel really good about it. Some other things that we have done with our senior students, talking about study skills. So we started with the year 10s, but then we've been building on it more and more each year, adding other elements, refining as you do. But with some of the work that you introduced us to, Steffi, with Dr. Amy Berry, we've been looking at that engagement continuum, and we've been really working hard with students, particularly in year 11 and 12, and we have one-on-one interviews, check-in interviews with them every semester around how they can really guide and drive their own learning and invest in their own learning. And that language has helped with the cultural shift. The last year's cohort, the ones that were in year 12 that did really well last year, we measured their engagement at the start, at the end of year 10, and then partway through year 11, and then again at the end of before their HSC. And we saw a 27% shift from kids with the driving their own learning from when we first started surveying them and using this language. So they're owning their learning, and they're really challenging each other. They're asking high quality feedback, really invested. And we hadn't really seen levels of that before we started this program. So I think it is a whole bunch of things coming together slowly over time, getting people on board and working at it. And then, so once we had those fundamental study skills kind of strategies in place, then we can really work on some of the other stuff. And then our next focus was writing. So Drew can talk about that.
Amazing. Can I first say wow, and you should be so proud of yourselves and the effort that you've put in. I've seen, you know, the shift over the years, and when Tess came to Katoomba and said, I'm going to help change the reputation of this school, and just look at what you're doing as a team.
I must say that we do have a fantastic team, and the teachers that teach that study skills are our exceptional teachers.
Yeah.
But what we do, it's not just a standalone course, because it's only one period a cycle, like one period a week that kids do it. We do it. What we do in study skills, we tap into what kids are doing in all of their other subjects. So, for example, flashcards at the moment, Year 10 are working hard on chemistry, getting ready for a chemistry exam, mid-year exam. So the strategies we teach in study skills, we directly apply to what they're learning there and then in their other subjects.
I love that. Does that help people to kind of get out of their, you know, traditionally high schools are seen as working in silos.
Yeah.
Does the study skills kind of help to bring everyone together?
I think so. There's been a lot of, you know, positive reception around this stuff. Some of our professional learning platforms too, we do walkthrough groups, professional learning teams, and some of those have been specifically focused on the stuff we've been doing in study skills for metacognition, higher order thinking, you know, checking for understanding. And it's just spreading the load across the school, and there's a lot of love for what we're doing.
That's so good. And Brad, if a school wanted to implement a study skills program, what should they prioritize first?
Those core skills, I think the retrieval practices are essential. Teaching kids how to get organized, the back to basics kind of stuff. How to manage themselves, how to manage their time. And then, yeah, some of those they might seem like simple tools, but they're really effective tools like mind mapping, note-taking, summarizing, those kind of things.
Awesome. Is there anything that you wouldn't mind sharing with our community around the study skills? Maybe one of the things you use for note-taking or...
Yeah, sure. I'll find a resource and I'll send it through to you. No worries.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks for that. Drew, we want to hear about your writing team.
Thanks. So we were able to really piggyback on the amazing work that had started with Brad and the study skills team. And as you sort of mentioned when you introduced me, I'd come to teaching a little bit later. And during my initial teacher education, I was surprised that there wasn't really any work being done on teaching initial teachers to teach writing. And it's the hardest thing that we ask students to do. It's a really difficult and challenging and complex activity to take new content that you're learning and then understand the conventions of writing and put those things together to build arguments through, you know, logical, consistent arguments is really hard. But I just could see that there wasn't a lot of talk about it, not a lot of work that I was able to see in that space. And so it's something I've been passionate about from the start, and I was able to here at Katoomba to really build on that and start to embed and work with staff around how we teach writing and understanding that the teaching of writing goes hand in hand with explicit teaching. So it's been a really nice combination of being able to upskill teachers on explicit teaching. You know, we teach writing within the model of I do, we do, you do. There's a lot of scaffolding, a lot of chunking, questioning, all those sort of things that we're focused on as explicit teachers, we were able to marry with the teaching of writing. And so what we really did was to try to work out as educators, there's lots of different methods to writing, but they're all kind of talking about the same thing generally, it's just different language. And that's actually one of the issues with teaching of writing, is that if everybody, and what we noticed was there's lots of amazing work being done in individual classrooms, and teachers had identified that they hadn't had a lot of initial teacher education, but they'd kind of worked it out themselves and chosen a bit of a method or a way to teach students. But that meant that in every classroom, people were teaching the same thing, but with different language, with different sort of methods and steps. And so what we needed to do was to have a discussion around, as a school, what sort of approach do we want to take? And there are differences across subjects, which we celebrate and identify, but we're also able to find commonalities. And so now we have that consistency to reduce that cognitive load for our students when they move between HISI and English and PE, for example. They can understand that I might be using slightly different language, and I'm using it for a reason. So we identify that I need to use slightly different language, but it fits in the same space as what's happening in English when we talk about the introduction to a persuasive essay or a body paragraph. And where are those similarities and where are those differences? And so that was sort of the starting place to try and get systems and processes that are school-wide, to take it out of individual classrooms to a school-wide approach. There's a lot of upskilling of staff. We particularly focus on the writing revolution, the Hockman method, which I'm a huge fan of. And also Think Forward Educators with Nathaniel Swain. These are sort of people, EDI with John Hollingsworth. These are the sorts of things that we identified that resonated with us as a team. And we've sort of pieced together our own professional learning that includes all those different methods and ideas and academic work. So a lot of upskilling of staff, and then working with students to, one of the most pleasing things is people are talking about writing. And that's something that I think is new over the last 4 or 5 years. The work that the school's been doing as a whole is that while sometimes we even have disagreements amongst ourselves about writing and how it should be done, these are really good conversations, but everyone's talking about writing. Students are talking about writing. You're hearing them speak back to you in the language and asking questions. So if this is what I'm hearing in this subject, is what you're talking about the same thing? And people are discussing writings. They're talking about conjunctions, right? We're having conversations where kids are just raising, subordinating phrases. It's a beautiful thing. But you have to teach that explicitly. It's not something that you just pick up naturally. You have to teach the conventions of writing explicitly, step by step, with scaffolding. And we identified 5 or 6 high impact strategies that we determined. You can't do everything, and Tess picked up on that when she was speaking earlier. You can't do everything. It becomes overwhelming for staff and for students. And so we identified high impact strategies, things like fixing fragmented sentences, run-on sentences, expanding sentences, using conjunctions like because, but, and so, as well as note-making using question words. And we've done a lot of work on PL with the staff and embedding those into classrooms. And then overlaying all of that is our new writing team with sort of dedicated staff who are passionate about writing. These are our lead writers. So we get together 3 times a term to discuss writing, to reflect, and to build these resources for staff, to create a vision for where we want to go, to map out writing in our different subjects. That's one of the key things we identified, that those differences were placing barriers to students to learning, because one subject does it different to others. But there are far more things we have in common across our different subjects in high school than there are differences. And we celebrate differences, we identify them, but we're able to see where they line up with each other for consistency. Like I said, through persuasive writing, there are lots of commonalities. Sometimes we're just using slightly different language, but they're there to achieve the same goal. So,
which acronym do you use?
Pardon?
Which acronym? I see so many in schools for those paragraphs.
Yeah, so we don't use one.
Okay.
That was part of it. We use common language, and I sent that through to you earlier, that matrix, which I think you'll make available to people. So it's the language is the same. We talk about whether it's a thesis statement or a judgment statement. So, but in the matrix that we have, they sit side by side, so you can see that they're the same thing. And in all through, I'm a HISI teacher. That's where my substantive role is, and so importantly, all through HISI, we're using that same language, the same structure for writing. English is doing the same, so staff are coming together to make those decisions. Okay, this is what we're doing. So we get that buy-in, we get that collaboration from staff who are then going to go back to their rooms. At the end of the day, staff go into their rooms and teach. And so you really need to have them on board. You need them to have that buy-in. And part of that was by having them be a part of determining what that structure was. And then we all have, everybody has a topic sentence, or we like to call it a controlling topic sentence. Some people like to call it point, but by putting in that matrix side by side, you can see that they're doing the same job. So we're trying not to stifle the independence of different faculties in high schools. That's important. But at the same time, being able to identify for students to reduce that cognitive load, that they're really the same thing, maybe just with slight tweaks.
And that mission statement you shared with me, was that something the writing team developed?
Yeah, and interestingly, if you've ever tried to sit in a room and there's about 15 members of the team to write a statement, like that's almost impossible. So what we did was actually use one of the writing methods that we teach to students. So one of them is note making around question words. So who, what, when, why, how. And so what we did was we had as the heading the writing team, and then we got everybody to answer those questions. So who is the writing team? Where is the writing team? When is the writing team? How do we work as a team? Why do we have the writing team? So we actually completed the same thing I do with my students around note making. And then I took back all those answers, which really gave me language. And we talk about that a lot with students. Writing begins with language. So understanding language and start at the word level can then build sentences, which then builds paragraphs. And so we took the same approach for our writing team to create what I think is a really lovely mission statement by starting at the word level and then building and using expanding sentences and all the same things we do with our students. We use that to create our own. And I think it came out really nicely. And again, we get that collaboration, we get that buy-in. Members of the team present professional learning at staff meetings, send out different PowerPoints and things with professional learning on them, little bite-sized chunks of grammar or punctuation so people can dip into it when they have the opportunity. We did a survey to all staff so we can understand what they were looking for, how we could support them in teaching writing, and we got some really great feedback there. So we're just sort of working our way through. We want this to be a long-term project, something that, and I think that's really important, as again, what Tess was saying, there's so many things that come at you as a teacher that we tried to use our professional judgment to say, this is what we think is our priority, and this is where we can really get strong growth in outcomes. And so, and we're going to stick with it and work the system that we've created and try not to get distracted by all the things that are going on and go with our judgment as professionals that writing is something that then can improve reading. It's a hierarchy. So writing, reading, speaking and listening as in that order. So we started at the top and that filters down.
Drew, there's so much that I want to celebrate in what you've shared with your writing team. I mean, the clear vision, the way that you've honored the expertise of the staff from the different faculties. You haven't just said you're doing this my way. The fact that you've modeled great writing instruction through the creation of that co-creation of that mission statement was super clever. I am stealing that, by the way. And I think we should share that with people in the newsletter. Did you want to add something?
I was going to say the thing about that was, and it's this when you have these tools for teaching writing, as I said, there's certain activities for expanding sentences, using appositives, etc. Like when we went to that meeting, I remember I was doing something to do with deputy, and I was a little bit late, and I suddenly had to, okay, we're going to create a mission statement, and I was like, I can use one of those techniques. And I think the reason to share that is because when you have half a dozen tools and techniques for writing, you can pull them out at any time and apply them to whatever the content is. So whatever that context is for writing, and writing and content go hand in hand. If you don't have anything to write, you're not going to be able to actually write something that's persuasive, and vice versa. So you can pull them out. And that's what I did. I just went, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? I haven't actually thought about it. I'm not particularly prepared because I had all these other things going on. And I was able to pivot to that. And that's where I think the power for teachers are, from having a toolbox of these activities that can be applied to any content at any time. So again, it's not 1,000 different things. It's actually just 6 high impact strategies that can be applied at any time.
I love that. I love that you've kept it simple and achievable, reduce the cognitive load for everyone. And again, like Brad's initiative, you're just helping bring everyone together towards the same goal, which is to improve writing, improve our writers. So much in that story that I could unpack, but thank you, Drew, for your efforts. It's obviously having a huge impact on your school. So thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Bob, I want to come back to you and hear your reflections maybe on their stories, and perhaps, what systems or habits can schools put in place to make scaffolding a sustainable everyday part of practice?
It's interesting because as I listened to everybody, what I was struck by was the focus. And I think that's a lot of times what we don't have, because we are trying to do 100 different things, if that. And in each example that y'all shared, you talked about focus. You talked about, we didn't try to do this, we tried to do this. And I really liked the fact that you have an emphasis on sustainability, that this isn't something you want to go away in a year, that in both cases of the examples, these are things you want to still be there as long as students need them. And what happens is the longer you do them, the more they become embedded in the school culture. And ultimately what can happen is that you may work yourself to a point where you don't need it as much, because it is so much a part of the school culture. And the fact that you got teachers on board and really got the ownership and the buy-in for it, I think those were the big things that I saw. One of the things that I might encourage you to do, just as you continue, because it's my favorite leadership activity, so I always like to share it, is an activity called Name It, Claim It, and Explain It. And what you do is when you're seeing a teacher doing something well, you take a snapshot or take a short video, whatever you want to do. And the next time you've got a meeting, you throw it up on the screen and you tell the teacher that you're going to do this. So don't blindside them a little bit to make sure you tell them. And you say, whoever this belongs to, this is an example of best practice. This is what we're doing right, and this is what we're going to continue to do. So whoever it belongs to, I want you to name it, claim it, and explain it to the rest of us. And you do it either during a meeting or you do it in an email that goes out, and then they have to hit reply all. And what you ultimately do, and you're pretty close to being able to do it this way, is you're not the one who identifies them. The teachers are identifying them from other teachers. And so you really are building that ownership. And I think strategies like that, which are real simple to do, are something that just continues to help you build, because the danger is, particularly after you've been doing something for a while and it's going well, there's a tendency to coast. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to lose your momentum. So I'm big on celebrating and looking for ways to say, this is a great thing to do. So I love Name It, Claim It, and Explain It.
I love that, Bob. I'm going to write those 3 down. We talk about naming and defining, which I think is quite similar, because if you can, I think this is where if you can name and define what you're doing well, you can repeat it. And so often we see really great practice, and then people go, I don't know, I just do it. And which is nice, but in terms of teaching other people, but also yourself being able to repeat what is well, what you're doing well. If you can name and define it, you can repeat it. So I think I love that idea, Bob. Yeah.
It's very similar. The reason I like to claim it is because you're reinforcing ownership.
Yeah.
And that's just another one of those pieces. You don't ever want to lose it because everybody's just doing it, and so we take it for granted. So I'm real intentional about those kinds of things.
And I have user routine.
Thank you.
I've used that routine, Barbara, from you, inspired by you during instructional rounds, and getting certain staff who, leaders and teachers who may not always be in the spotlight or want to be in the spotlight. I ask for permission first. But when they get up there and explain, their thinking around what they were doing and the impact that it had on their students, everyone leans in, everyone's locked in because they understand now that it's not just something on a wall. They're learning about what was in the teacher's head, and I think there's so much gold in hearing each other's think alouds. So we are already talking about leadership moves, but Katoomba High team, what other leadership moves helped your staff embed these and value these approaches with your writing team and your study skills work, especially across subjects and year levels?
I think, again, there's a few things, and I think some of them are structural and some of them are more, about people, and about bringing people along. And so, but part of what we've done is change the focus of the structure of that executive team. And 4 or 5 years ago, that head teacher secondary studies position, not only did that create somebody, a position for somebody who's very, very skilled in this area. And she's been able to do a lot of great work. That's Belinda Stephanie, as you know, and she's done a lot of great work in that field. She's a great thinker and a great, she loves to learn herself. So she's done some great work there. But it's also a signal, I think, to staff and students and the community that this is important to us. And just by, you use that word claiming, but claiming that importance and saying to people, this is what we value. I think that's helped change a few perceptions as well. So it's a bit practical, but a bit more high level and is it inspirational? Maybe not quite, but it's about that, just changing that thinking. The other thing we've done more recently too is Brad's role as a deputy. We've changed the focus of that role to be really, so he looks after year 11 and 12 very specifically. So again, that was an area we realized that kids were coasting a little bit and probably didn't have the high expectations. He's really built those expectations. He demands that if they want if they want to get a HSC, if they want to walk away with that at the end of their schooling, then they need to work for it and they need to demonstrate that. And we do that with lots of support. We do that with lots of hugs, as it were. But it's done in a way that those kids know that that they've got to do the work if they want to get to that point. So I think those things have been really important. And the other thing too is we've alluded to this, but around having those few focus areas and also with our school excellence plan. As I was listening to Drew and listening to you both talking about our focus on writing, for me as a leader, we need to focus on numeracy. That's an area that we're not doing as well in as a school as we could. We've got quite a big uplift target on that. And there's a temptation in me every time I look at it to go, we really need to do something. We need to do some whole school. And I'm resisting that urge at the moment because I know if we start doing too much in that area, particularly outside the mathematics faculty, they're doing some work, but outside the mathematics faculty, we're going to lose momentum in writing. And I really want that to happen, that to be embedded before we shift the focus. And we've got a 3-year plan that the writing team will really work on professional learning this year and into next year. And then next year we'll start to transition and do a little bit more numeracy when we've got some of the other things embedded. So I think there's sort of the leadership moves, I guess, that we've
And I think, Tess, just to hear you say that, I feel like a lot of leaders listening and teachers would be like, oh, it exists. Principals can really protect us from trying to do all the new shiny things. And it would be particularly hard for you, Tess, as a maths teacher by grade to not go all into maths. But I think you've got, the base with your study skills, your writing team to eventually have the maths team. And you can learn from the successes of these initiatives. So thank you, Tess, you certainly are an inspiration. Okay. This is not the time to be humble. This is all about your school. Focusing on and claiming what you value and maintaining that high support for all, high expectations and support for all your students is certainly clear. Barbara, how can leaders and teachers tell if their scaffolding strategies are supporting struggling students and are actually helping students engage in their learning and succeeding?
Well, I think there's two parts. I mean, the first part is, are you scaffolding for rigorous learning? Are you scaffolding for learning that reflects high expectations? And that sounds really basic, but I have to tell you, I go to a lot of places that that's not true. They're not doing that. What they think is rigorous is not. So you have to take a good hard look at the work, whatever subject it is, but take a good hard look at the work and say, is this rigorous or not? So I think that's the first thing, because if you're scaffolding for work that's too easy, you're not getting where you want to go. So you got to look at the work to start with. And then you say, all right, is the scaffolding actually leading to those higher levels? Or am I just dumbing it down? Because that's what we do sometimes with scaffolding. We just say, oh, we'll give them something easier to read. That's not what you want to do. There's all kinds of strategies out there that are effective, that are very good. But you've got to know that what you're shooting for is rigorous. And so I would tell you that's the first step, much more so than the strategies. Now, when it comes to the strategies and how do you know if they're working for students or not, the best way to look at it is by observing what the students are doing. You know, did they learn? Were they able to achieve at a higher level? Were they able to complete the assignment? So I like the just observing. Now, it's also important to look at how they scored on whatever you had them do. So that quantitative data is important. You know, were they able to get a 94? Were they able to get a B? Whatever. But I think you watch your students. You watch them and say, is this working? Is this not working? Do they understand what they're using? Can they use it in a new setting on their own? So I think you've got a qualitative and a quantitative approach. But again, I would go back to, if the work is not rigorous, the scaffolding isn't going to get them there. So that's a key piece.
That's something we keep coming back to in rounds, the task, the qualities of the task, which Bob, we get a lot of insights from you with, especially with your rigor rubric. And the scaffolds, whether we're planning them, are they really supporting our students to be successful? And are students actually using them beyond us and our classroom? Are they creating their own scaffolds to help with their learning? Now, Katoomba, this is the last question I'd like to ask you, and you have touched on it already through your stories, but you have been recognized as one of the most improved schools in New South Wales for HSC results. Like, that's huge. What changes have you noticed in terms of student engagement, study skills, writing outcomes, or even teacher confidence?
I just want to say two things, and then I might ask the other two to jump in and because they've been here a little bit longer. But two things. I mean, I reflect often on how incredibly lucky I am to be here at Katoomba High School. I've got an unbelievable team around me, my senior executive team and the executive team and the teaching staff. But you know, when you've got that trust in your leaders that you're working with, I feel like I can do what I do and set the scene and set that, and people go away and do that. And plus, I came in at a time when a lot of work was underway, that Brad and Drew and others had done a lot of that lead up work, and so I feel that sometimes I'm riding on their coattails, but I'll take that. But the second thing I was going to say too is that the interesting thing, I'm a great believer that success breeds success, and so the success we had last year is being talked about. We knew that good stuff was happening, but it was kind of the proof that teachers needed and kids needed and the community more generally needed. And I'm hearing now people who are not even directly connected with the school saying, wow, there's great things happening at Katoomba High School. And that gives people the confidence to go, oh, maybe what we are doing is working, and put a little bit more effort in or try something, be willing to try something. Some of those, the people who might have been a bit reluctant are more willing to have a go when they see success. So I see just that feeling in the place of more confidence and more pride and I guess more belief in themselves. I don't know, Drew and Brad, do you see that too?
Yes, absolutely. We have a wonderful team here, and we've worked really hard to build that staff capacity and collective efficacy, I suppose. But it's been really hard work over a long time. It's slow, strategic, focused, as we've mentioned, and working on the right things for our community. Not saying if we can transplant this model in other schools and other settings, it might not be right for them, but it's about knowing our people and how we work and challenging them with the right balance of that high expectations, the high challenge, but the high support. And yeah, I think we're heading in the right direction. It's really lovely to see, and people are excited about it. But as I said earlier, the greatest joy is really, going up into that senior study space and watching those kids really own their learning, working with each other and really supporting each other. It's really nice to see.
I would say, Steph, as a middle leader and part-time senior leader at the school, you need a boss who's going to support that vision that you have. So, a lot of the writing stuff has come out of sitting down with Tess and putting the case forward for why this is what we should be focused on. As I said, we only have certain things that we're doing, and we're going deep on them. And so there was a lot of rigor around making that determination of what was going to be the best for our students. And then to have a boss who will support that, who will trust that, have those conversations with you to work through that has been really important to then give you the freedom to get out there in the school and make these things happen. That's been really important for someone like myself, and I'm sure for Brad and the others who run these sort of teams, to have that faith and trust and support from your boss. You asked about what we've seen. We've obviously achieved some really fantastic high-end results, band sixes and people achieving really high marks in the HSC, but the value add as well has been really significant. So boosting those students from those lower bands 1 and 3 up until 4, 5, and 6, which is one of our goals. We've seen real growth in that area, and a lot of that is study skills. It's those foundational writing skills, which means a student who previously would say, I can't write an answer to that, or I've got nothing, is able to take that little bit of content and understanding they have and put it into a coherent sentence, paragraph, whatever, however far they can go. And those marks, they boost so quickly at that sort of towards that lower end. And they're moving from bands 1 and 2s to 3s and 4s then. So the value adding that we've been able to support our students to achieve has been really great to see. And I think when they've got that rigor in writing and academia generally, they're able to pivot. So in the HSC, being able to pivot is so important. You get thrown whatever question you get from the examiners, and having students who trust their knowledge, trust their writing ability, who understand how certain phrases link to, say, cause, or how phrases and writing links to consequence, change, continuity. They understand how to compare two things because they've been taught the language of compare and contrast. And by having that toolbox and that foundational knowledge, they can go into an exam, and whatever gets thrown at them, they can identify the nature of the question and they can pivot their writing. And that's something that I've really seen in particularly stage 5 and particularly stage 6, into the HSC, which is, I think, a big part of what everyone's been doing.
Fantastic. Oh, it's just great to hear your journey and it's been a privilege to be part of your journey for even just a little bit, and to see the growth over these past 3 years. For me, what stood out in our conversation today is that scaffolding isn't just about simplifying learning or dumbing things down. It's about making the complex accessible for our students without lowering our expectations. It's about giving our students the support they need to take ownership of their learning, of their challenging content, and space to grow into independent thinkers. From what the Katoomba High School team shared, I've heard it's about a relentless and intentional focus on our clear vision, our mission, maintaining these high expectations for all, while honoring the expertise of our staff through meaningful collaboration and while supporting our staff to be successful with our students, and also celebrating and claiming our successes, which I hope I've tried to capture in this interview today. So congratulations to Katoomba High School. You should be incredibly proud of your efforts over the past couple of years. There's a lot that I'm sure schools will be able to take from your journey. And Barbara, thank you for your being so generous with your time again. I don't know what time it is, but I'm sure it's not a great time for you right now. And thank you everyone for listening, and thank you for being part of this community.